Hello again, friends, and you are my friends, and welcome to another Meet the Opposition, where this week we are building up to Everton at home, Portman Road, 3 p.m. kickoff this Saturday. A big game. Is it a must-win? Let me know in the comments. I am joined by Mike from the Unholy Trinity Everton podcast. Looking forward to hearing his thoughts. Before we do, don't forget, we are partnered with Match Bingo. Play Match Bingo, win cash prizes. And each time you play Match Bingo, you do support the crucial work of the East Anglian Air Ambulance, a crucial service I'm sure we can all agree. Play Match Bingo, win cash prizes, £2 a bingo card, bingo's on there as well, all the Premier League games. Download the app wherever you normally download your apps. Over 18s only, be gamble aware. Right, Mike, the Unholy Trinity Everton podcast. I started how I always start on this show. Just currently, how are the Everton fan base at Goodison Park feeling after what has been a roller coaster start? The last game before the break was a 0-0 draw against Newcastle. Just how are things feeling after what has been an absolute roller coaster start?
Still very lukewarm. It's gone from cold to lukewarm. It's probably the best way to describe it. As you mentioned, then 3 games on the spin unbeaten. We've turned a bit of a corner. We feel getting that first win against Crystal Palace was hugely important. And the longer it goes on without a win, the harder it gets, and the pressure builds and builds and builds. And as everyone will know, the club's been through a lot of dark times in the last couple of years. It's been difficult. Obviously relegation battles and things like that. And we don't want to return to those days. And to be fair to the manager last season, I think we achieved 46 points. We had 2 points deductions, but we were miles clear of the relegation zone without those points deductions, and they did particularly well in such grave circumstances. So the manager had a lot of credit in the bank, I think, from last season and the season before. People have wavered a touch, I think, towards the manager this season. There's certainly been calls for him to be removed. It's probably the best way to put it. Obviously, we're currently going through the whole takeover situation, which looks like it's reaching its conclusion, and we should have new owners by the back end of November, start of December, all being well. So, to say as a fan base, we found it hard, we found it difficult, the fact that we've had so many years on the spin where it's been such a struggle. But I think that we want to, when this takeover goes through, we want to start seeing a bit more progression now. We understand that we've had to temper our expectations for a number of years now, and the reasons why we've had to. But we want to start seeing some progression. And to be fair, a lot of people think, myself included, that this squad of players is better than what we've had last season. So, after 7 games, 5 points, not a particularly fantastic return. And we feel really it should be a bit better than that.
But you do mention that you have turned a corner, and we mentioned the 3 games unbeaten. What's been the catalyst of that corner being turned, do you feel? Do you think it's has Sean Dyche changed anything? And what are your personal thoughts on the manager? Are you a fan of his, or are you sort of joining perhaps the voices that are questioning?
I mean, to answer the Sean Dyche question first is probably a little bit easier. Us and me as a podcast, we certainly take on board and have taken on board how difficult the circumstances have been. Let's get it right. The manager last season especially was not only a manager and coach, he was counsellor, he was head of communications, he was dealing with every single question to do with points deductions and ownership issues. When he first came into the club, the chairman, the owner, the board weren't coming to match. There was all this thing around fan protest. There was lies from the board and things like that, which he had to deal with. And he's just coming into a football club trying to do a job. He's had a hell of a ride and a hell of a difficult set of circumstances to deal with. And I think that sometimes fans, we don't see it. We don't really, even to this day, we don't know the true picture of what's happened behind closed doors. And believe me, from what I know, it's worse than what people even think it has been. So it's been really, really hard for him to actually just go about his job and deal with so many different things. He's been spinning so many plates, and it always falls back to the manager. He's been the face of the football club. And I don't think, I've said this before on many occasions, I think last season, I don't think there was any other manager that could have dealt with those circumstances and dealt with them as well as he did. I think other managers would have certainly buckled and certainly have lost the job, and Everton wouldn't have got the points that they got, because we know how Dyche sets up. We know what he's all about. But I think, in terms of this season, those first 4 games, you look at 2 of those games, we threw away 2-goal leads in 2 of those games. I mean, the Bournemouth game was unforgivable. To be 2-0 up with 3 minutes of normal time to go, how can you lose a game 3-2? It's just, it was incredible. I was sitting there, obviously, as a season ticket holder, pulling my hair out, and I just could not believe what I was witnessing. And then Aston Villa was a bit different, a quality side. You played them yourself. Yep. Difficult side, on the best day, they can beat the best sides in the league. Obviously, they're a Champions League side for a reason. But I think what we were seeing in the first 4 games was we were far too open, conceding far too many goals. I think we conceded 13 goals in the first 4 games. We had the 4th best defence in the Premier League last season and the 2nd most clean sheets. To go from that to shipping 13 goals in 4 games, it was some shift. Now, I think potentially one of the reasons why we've seen a bit of a change is one man who's come back. He came back for the Palace game, but then got a bit of a niggle and missed Newcastle, was Jared Brantwaite. Massively important. He should be back for the game on Saturday, all being well, which is great for us. So him being in there, he provides a real balance to the back 4. He's a left-footed centre-half. He's also much better than the alternative as well. He brings calmness. I think Jordan Pickford is much calmer when he's got Brantwaite and Tarkowski in front of him, as opposed to, say, a Michael Keane or someone like that. So he's been important. We've had injuries, so we've had some players coming back in. We're gradually getting back now up to speed and up to full fitness. But with still a couple of players out, we're looking at James Garner's got a bit of a back issue, and we've still got like Chimiti and Ambrosia who are yet to feature this season as well. But we're getting there in terms of players coming back, so that's helped. But I think defensively, we probably just returned a little bit back to what we were doing last season. We look a little bit more difficult to break down. The Newcastle game, as much as they had a lot of the ball, there was not really they had one sort of clear-cut chance with Anthony Gordon in the second half when he put it over the bar. Obviously, penalty aside, which was one of those situations where it was a decent save, wasn't a great penalty. But in terms of open play, they didn't really cause us too many issues. So Everton sort of went back to being a bit more gritty, a bit more difficult to actually break down, which was the basis of any Sean Dyche side. He likes to defend. He likes to defend well. Yeah. We struggle with defending set pieces. We looked a little bit better when we conceded 11 corners against Newcastle, and we dealt with them. So we're looking a little bit stronger, I think, defensively, and that's the foundation of Sean Dyche's Everton side, which I think we have to do well, and then we build from there, and then hopefully get results from there, which is what's happened in the last 3 games. And
that's the thing, we look at other teams on our show every week, and we were discussing Everton, obviously match of the day highlights, what's going on. And I was saying, the Sean Dyche team is very much defensive in terms of defend the width of your box. It's strong, it's gritty, and it wasn't that those ingredients weren't coming out at that particular point. And when they weren't coming out, I was starting to think, what's the Sean Dyche Everton look like? Then if that's not what he's bringing to the party, which is what he's done. And I might be wrong, correct me if I am, across his career, particularly at Burnley and previous years with yourselves. So I was questioning that as a neutral looking in, if you like. And it's interesting to hear you're sort of returning back to those staples, those ingredients, because that is, as you say, a Sean Dyche foundational piece. You can't evolve as I'm, without defending the width of your box and being strong. And that Bournemouth game particularly, the last goal sort of sticks in my mind. The runner from midfield, and nobody goes with him, which is fatigue almost. I know it's the late part of the game, but fatigue in August, and you're thinking, what's going on here? But he's turned the corner, you feel?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that game in particular, you mentioned about fatigue, and I was sitting there in my seat, and about sort of 20 odd minutes to go, and the players that looked tired were Tim Irabunam, who basically was lost for the 3rd goal. He had nothing in his legs at all. Yeah. Seamus Coleman was done. Garner Gay looked like he was done. So there was 3 players there where we're sitting there watching, thinking, go and shore up the back 4, go and bring on a 3rd centre half, and go with 3 centre halves and obviously 2 wing backs, and then put an extra midfield on, pack the midfield, and take off those players that are tired. That was the obvious thing to do. At 2-0 up, the game was done at that particular point.
Well, should have been.
Well, it should well exactly. He should have been, but then he took off Iliman and Dye, who was our outlet. And I mean, he's a real talent. And I mean, I can talk about him all day. He's a fabulous footballer. So he had a fabulous game. So to give him his sort of ovation, almost, he took him off after 80 minutes. And then when they scored the first goal, Calvert-Lewin then came off. Now, for me, Calvert-Lewin looked absolutely fine, and he's pivotal to how we play. He's really important, and like I said, Beto, he can't do what Calvert-Lewin does. Doesn't hold the ball up anywhere near as well. Hasn't got the pace of Calvert-Lewin. So, when you look at those two changes, and we're sitting there thinking, well, hang on, you can see 2 or 3 players that are flagging. Why aren't we making those changes and sorting out, obviously, making the sense of the park busy, so you have to go wide, and we'll deal with the crosses then. And we just couldn't understand it, and that's the thing I think dice sometimes, where we look at game management and those early games in particular. Not just him, the players as well, because they're the ones on the pitch. The simple things like, there's a few minutes ago against Bournemouth, I think it was a 2-0 before they'd even got a goal back, and we're, instead of going to the corner, we're trying to put crosses in, and we're getting shots off, and it's just like, just relax, slow the game down. Yeah. And we'll see it out. And so the players were as much to blame as the manager, but he should be seeing the players that are tired. He should be seeing what changes need to be made for the good of the team and making them. And sometimes he's quite stubborn, the manager, and he doesn't make a substitution until it's almost too late. Sometimes it's a bit reactive. But I think the last sort of few games, I think we've seen the right subs being made. We've seen the right setup from the off. Players probably a bit more switched on. I know Seamus Coleman gets quite heavily involved with team talks and sort of getting in the players' ears, because he's been injured for about sort of 3 or 4 weeks himself, but he's always there. And I think the Crystal Palace game, it came out that he was one of the main factors within the dressing room at half time. 1-0 down, and he sort of led the team talk. It came out. So I think, the players are starting to sort of settle into the season a little bit now. Quite a few new players. We've had quite a few players leave in the summer. Probably more players coming than we thought that we would see, given obviously our financial situation. So that always takes a bit of time as well. But hopefully, what we've seen in recent weeks is going to be how we're going to approach things going forward, with further room to progress and play better, because it's not being fantastic, but it's important to get points when you're not playing particularly well, but we are seeing a better defensive display is probably the best way to look at it.
Before I give you the opportunity to talk about some individual players, what's been sort of a weakness of Everton's game so far this year that perhaps Town might look to exploit on Saturday?
I mean, say the first 4 games was how open we were, in midfield. Yeah. We were leaving gaps all over the place, so we were overcommitting, and then players weren't recovering. So that was a big factor. As I say, we seem to have addressed that. We were having issues early season with defending set pieces. Seemed to be a bit better against Palace and against Newcastle, I would say. But doesn't mean that we're perfect at them, and doesn't mean that we're going to be perfect during the game on Saturday. I think the thing with Everton, when we play at our best, we're difficult to beat, but we counter well. We've got players now, the likes of Iliman and Dye, who's really quick. He's got great feet. He goes after, he commits defenders. He's got an eye for goal. You got him. You got the pace of Calvert-Lewin. Dwight McNeil, he's not a particularly quick player, but the number of times you've seen him on the counter attack, driving with the ball, getting a shot away, playing players in, he's pivotal to that. Harrison's got a little bit of pace as well on the right hand side. So I think it all depends whether Everton decide to overcommit and can't recover, and that's one thing with yourselves and with any side really. If we do that, then we will be ripped apart, because you can't leave your defence exposed, and certainly can't leave your defence exposed to pace. But I'm hoping that we've learned those lessons from those first 4 games, and we'll take in what we've won and what we've achieved in the last 3 games to the game on Saturday.
Very much sounds like, as you were talking now, I was thinking to myself, if we can inject some pace into this game, if we can stretch this game and try and bring out some of those early season, issues that you were having, that perhaps you say you've gotten over, but you never know if you can bring them back out into the game in the live environment. That sounds like a formula that perhaps McKenna and co at Town could be looking at this week when they're formulating their game plan. But in terms of individual players, now obviously as fans, we're not season ticket holders of Everton. We often only see if they're on Sky or Match of the Day highlights. So I'll ask you 2 questions in terms of players: your best player in the first 7 and your most underrated player in the first 7?
I think, I mean, early on, the first few games when things weren't going well, as much as he was flagging against Bournemouth, Tim Irabudum came in from Aston Villa and made a real impression. You know, young lad, middle of the park. We obviously let Amadou Onana go to Aston Villa for decent money. So we had a few issues to address in the middle of midfield, and he came in and made a real good start. But I think the one player who's been our player this season so far has got to be Iliman Ndiaye, just because we haven't seen a player like him at Goodison Park for many, many years. I mean, he gets comparisons to former favourites of mine. You know, this was, I remember so many players from the David Moyes era, of course, but Stephen Pienaar is the comparison that people make. Now, Stephen Pienaar was a fantastic footballer. Yes, you know, him and Leighton Baines on that left-hand side. What a duo that was. And for me, I always go back to those times. I think we had the two best fullbacks in the league at the time, in Leighton Baines and Seamus Coleman. I think we had the best left-hand side in the league in terms of Pienaar and Baines, because the relationship and the chemistry was so good. And that sometimes is half the battle with any side. If you can form relationships and players know where the other player is going to be. And, you know, that's how it was with those two players. But Ndiaye, he carries the ball so well. And I hope, well, I say I hope you see it. You hope that you won't see it. But on Saturday, you will see it. You know, he's our out all the time. So you look to get the ball to him. He's great in tight spaces. He goes at players. He'll beat sort of one or two or three. He's quick. Defensively, his covering is very, very good. You know, Mikalenko might go ahead of him, and he reads the game really, really well. And that was a bit of a surprise to me. You know, with such an attacking player, you quite often don't see them want to do the dirty side of things and get back and cover the fullbacks, but he does. He's got an eye for goal. As I say, he's just a terrific all-round attacking player. And if we're going to do something and we're going to defend fairly deep and look to soak up a bit of pressure, because Everton don't like possession. We don't play well with the ball, which was a surprising thing, I'm sure. But we don't like to have much of the ball, 35%, 40%. We'll do the same on Saturday. But we've got to have a decent and effective counter-attack. Otherwise, it looks like really, really boring and really, really ineffective. But he's the one that makes us tick from an attacking sense, I would say. Sort of underrated, probably in a way, Dwight McNeil. And I don't think he's particularly had a...
He's goal scorer currently, isn't he? I know it's early season, you know, but
yeah, he is. And I think the thing about Dwight McNeil is that if you watch him, you know, we watch him week in, week out, and we think that he could do more. You know, his output this season's been really good. You know, we look at the thing, he scored 4 goals. He's top of the goal scoring charts for us. He never scores a bad goal. Yeah, well, yeah, and I think chances created, I think he's top of that as well in the league, which is some stat. Yeah. So it shows you how well he's performing this season. But sometimes we don't really see it. So like with the eye test, you watch it and think, well, hasn't really done a great deal? But obviously the stats don't really back that up. But I do think that he's underappreciated almost. I don't think Everton fans sort of love him. You know, it's one of those where, you know, if you took out Ndiaye out of that side, you'd say we're really impacted. And if we took out Dwight McNeil, you'd say, well, we could sort of maybe replace him. But then his figures this season speak differently. And, you know, he's been through a tough time. His partner, she was severely ill last year, which impacted his performances. And he is a favourite to Sean Dyche's. You know, if he's fit, he plays. But he's put him in as the number 10 over the last few games. So as opposed to when Ndiaye playing as a 10, McNeil's gone to the 10 from the left-hand side, and then Ndiaye plays on the left-hand side. And it gives him a little bit more space and a little bit more, a few more opportunities to be a bit more creative and impact the game and get closer to the striker, which, you know, him and Calvert-Lewin are still trying to develop a relationship, which is important to remember as well. That will get better as the season goes on. But he's a real talented footballer. You know, technically, he's got a fabulous left foot. Set pieces are very, very good. As I said, he always scores spectacular goals. You never see a bad goal from Dwight McNeil. It's just not in his locker. But, you know, we think he's only 24. I think he is, Dwight McNeil. He's only a young footballer, but he's been around for years, you know, and he's only going to get better. But he hasn't got, so he just hasn't got pace. If he had pace, he'd be playing for England every single international window. But For me, he's still a very good footballer and someone who maybe we don't always appreciate as much as we possibly should.
Okay, hold up, halftime. If you're liking the content, smash the like button, subscribe to Talking Town, and don't forget, we are partnered with SolarWise Roofing and Building. All things roofing, all things building. Get your free roof checks from Shane at SolarWise Roofing and Building. Call 01206 628 544. That's 01206 628 544. Or visit solarwiseroofingandbuilding.co.uk. SolarWise Roofing and Building. Be wise this winter. Be SolarWise. Right, back to the content. What are your expectations this year? Is it purely looking at survival, or are you still holding on to perhaps mid-table and kicking on again? Because obviously, as you mentioned, without the points deductions last year, you were looking a really decently good side in terms of points.
I think that's what people forget. I think people just think because we were down in and around the sort of bottom 4, bottom 5 positions that we were fighting relegation. Well, if you ignore the points deduction, we weren't. And Everton were around, I think, 12, 13, something like that, and comfortably well away.
Yep.
I think we were safe. We were safe by Christmas points wise. So it was amazing, really. So I think I said earlier on, I think this squad is better than last season. I don't think it's a relegation squad. I don't think we should be fighting around the bottom 3, bottom 4 positions of the table. And that's not from a position of any kind of arrogance. That's just that I think this side is better than what they've shown at the start of the season. Sure. I think as the off the field stuff is now being sorted, the future is very, very bright. You've got a fabulous football stadium nearly ready to go on the banks of the Mersey there, which we're all looking forward to moving into. The future for this football club, assuming the takeover goes through over the next few weeks or so, is fantastic. And the players should be looking forward to that and wanting to be a part of that. So I think, me personally, I think we should be in and around sort of between 11, 12, 13. That should be the aim for the season. I don't think we should be considering ourselves. Others may do, and that's absolutely fine. But we shouldn't be considering ourselves as being a side that are going to be fighting relegation, because they should be better than that. And I think that they need to sort of shake that off now. The last 3 seasons have been really hard. You look at the one where Lampard comes in and we stay up against Crystal Palace with that famous 3-2 win. You then go back to the next season, but under Sean Dyche, he replaces Lampard, and it goes to the last game of the season against Bournemouth. Sitting in Goodison Park that day, where took me back to my childhood against Wimbledon in 1994, which we don't want to be experiencing those times. And last season we were safe much earlier, after a 1-0 win over Brentford, which was, we won three games in 6 days in the April at Goodison Park, Forest, Liverpool and then Brentford. And, we don't want to be involved in those situations. And I think that this side is better than that. I think the balance is better than last season. And I think mid-table, sort of top of the bottom half, if you like, should be the aim of this side. Let's not get carried away. We're not going to be fighting for European places. And neither should we be. But we certainly shouldn't be near the bottom 3 either. So let's sort of get away from that side of things and look to try and progress before we do leave Goodison Park.
I think a lot of things is obviously perception for fans that aren't fans of Everton, and I was surprised when I was researching for today, because I knew I was sitting down with you, in terms of those points and just how comfortable without the points deduction it would have actually been for you guys. Because I think again it's perception because of the noise around the football club, and it feels like Everton have been on an uphill battle in terms of staying in the division since I was 10, if I'm honest, or younger, and so it's that perception. But talking about perception, what's the perception of yourself as a football fan on us so far, 7 games in?
Yeah, I think it's hard, isn't it? Because you don't watch, like you said, you don't watch Everton every single week, and I don't watch Ipswich every single week, and you're reliant on when Ipswich on the telly, and if Everton don't win, I don't watch Match of the Day. So you can imagine how many times I've watched Match of the Day this season. Sorry, so you don't see much of the side. From what bits I have seen, clips I've seen, listening to other pundits and what have you, and just looking at the fixtures on face value. You've had Man City, Liverpool, Villa, and Brighton in the first 7. So there's 4, 2 really difficult games, and then 2 hard games in terms of Villa and Brighton. And before the West Ham game in your last game, you haven't really been being torn apart, you know, and that's that's not being disrespectful. When sides come up, obviously the transition from Championship to Premier League, it's a big jump, and obviously recruitment is so important, you know, to come into the season and sign, hit the ground running. And I think that, you know, if you got 4 draws out of those 7 games, and that's a decent return given the fact, you know, who you've actually played at the start of the season. Your manager obviously is hardly thought of. He's somebody who, I think when we've gone through a number of managers in recent years, someone who's come up on our list quite a few times, to be honest with you. And obviously the likes of the Laps come in, he scored goals. It's always helps when you've got someone who can come in and score goals. It's a good habit to be in. So I think you've done okay. I think obviously the thing that I always look at Luton last season, and because people seem to make this comparison with yourselves and with Luton. Now I look at Luton, and they started the season off, I think, trying to play quite defensively, and were getting beat. So then, according to their manager, they sat down and said, well, why don't we just play our football and you know, see what happens inside and enjoy it? And they won a lot of plaudits and a lot of fans. And I said at the time, but it's all well and good doing that, but take away our point deductions and Forest point deduction, they would have been gone along much earlier than when they actually got relegation confirmed. And it's all well and good saying you're going out on your shield and things like that, but you've got to find a way, and you've got to adapt as a football team to try and stay in the Premier League. And I think obviously, and I hope that Ipswich do, and you know, with the manager that you've got, I think he is a very good manager, and he will learn really quickly, and he will find a way. You know, I think you started the season, you know, pretty solid, to be fair. Picked up points when maybe you weren't expected to, and I think that if you sort things out defensively and you know, get to understand the Premier League in a bit more detail, I think you could be okay. And I think you've got a bit of quality there. I think you've got the makings of a decent side. And don't get me wrong, you know, the chances are it will be a bit of a slog this season, but I'd urge anyone not to compare you to Luton, because Luton are not a great example. Luton came up and they had a go, but they would have been down once earlier. So I think Ipswich have got a real chance here. And I go back to, again, when I was younger, and I remember Ipswich being in the Premier League, you know, for a number of years. I remember, you know, Everton going to Portman Road and things like that. And I always saw Ipswich, I think back to the sticker books and things like that when I was a kid, and you were in there, and, you know, I was thinking about John Walker and players like that I remember. And, you know, Ipswich were a Premier League side, and, you know, hopefully for yourselves, and I think it's great for the Premier League to have you back in there, that you can do something and stay up this season.
One of the founding members of the Premier League, you know, back at the top table, you know. So it's good to see. All right, we'll go to some questions from our Discord. Josh asks, do you feel like you've underachieved so far this season? Which I'm going to guess you're going to say yes, because you obviously feel that you mentioned the squad earlier in the show is better than what it's performed. So I'll jump to Owen. He says, do you worry, having flirted with relegation the last couple of seasons, that relegation is a real possibility this season? So again, I'm going to guess you're going to say no.
Yeah, I don't think it should. I don't think it should be. I don't think it should be. Now, whether it is or it isn't, you know, is another matter. But me personally, this side should not be down there. Now, they may be for all manner of reasons, and also, I think the more time you spend and the more seasons you spend in that same predicament where you are fighting to stay in the Premier League, at some point your luck runs out as well. That's something else that you've got to take on board. But I go back to last season and say we'd be nowhere near it. If it wasn't for points deductions, we wouldn't even be being part of the conversation. So that for me tells you that we should be doing better than we currently are. There's been a few players who have left compared to last season, but not so much that, you know, as I say, we haven't been weakened. Say the biggest casualty or the biggest sale we had was Onana. But I mean, a lot of Everton fans, I like them. I think he's going to be a top quality player. A lot of Everton fans thought that he underachieved and he didn't perform as well as he should have performed, and wanted more from him. So if you look at it from that aspect, we haven't been weakened in the middle of the park, but it is taking a bit of time, I think, to sort things out in there and get a little bit more sort of structure and solidity in the middle of the park. But no, I relegation fears for me, I suppose, after what we've gone through the last few seasons, they sit at the back of your mind. But me personally, I feel that we shouldn't be down there.
Got one stadium, one takeover question, and one player question. I'll start with a player question from Rob. What are his thoughts, or your thoughts, on the clubs circling to sign Calvert-Lewin in the summer when his contract expires? Will Everton get him tied down to a new contract before January, do you think?
There's talk that we are sort of back at the table with Calvert-Lewin. I think the Freakins, obviously, who were looking to buy the club, the group who own Roma. Apparently, there's something going on in terms of Calvert-Lewin. I think the ship has sailed. I think he would have signed it by now. Maybe he needs to change. I think there's a little bit of bad blood, I think, in terms of he went through a rough time when he was injured and he got rushed back by Benitez, and when he brought him back, and he broke down pretty much straight away, and then spent literally 9-10 months out, so I think he feels like the club didn't look after him then, but we've been through numerous managers since then. So me personally, I think, from his perspective, that shouldn't really be part of his decision, but maybe it is time for him to move on. But I think if we don't agree a deal between now and the start of the January transfer window, the club will look to move him on in January to get some money in for him. That's my opinion, but it depends where we are in the league, because obviously if we let him go for, say, 10-12 million pound in January, if he's a difference between staying up and going down, if we are sort of floating around there, then it's worth much more to us if we keep him and he scores the goals to keep us in the Premier League than it is to get 10 or 12 million pound in January. So it's one of those. I think it depends as well how well Brozier and Schmidt do when they come back from their injuries. If they come in and they score a few goals, the club then would be quite as reluctant to let Calvert-Lewin go. But I feel like his time at Everton is done. Now, whether it's he goes in January or he goes in the summer, I can't see a new deal being signed, to be honest.
And you're not the only person who be waiting to see what Brozier can do when he's fit, because obviously Town fans were excited to be signing him, and then it was, then it wasn't, then it was, then it wasn't, and of course he ended up going to Everton. And Rob's second part of the question was about the takeover. What are the Everton's fans' thoughts about a takeover finally happening?
There's a lot of relief, but obviously we're not there just yet. We've had many false dawns. We've had sort of the horror story of 777, which is still lingering. So those who don't know, obviously they loaned us over many, many months when they were the ones who were looking like they were going to buy the club, and we heard all manner of stories around fraud cases and criminal cases, but they were loaning the club about £20 million every single month, which was going towards the running costs and the stadium and things like that. So there's a court case currently happening in America, which involves money and 777, because they've basically gone bust, but then someone else has taken over sort of what money is owed to them. So there's all factors around, and apparently the Freakins, this is all being sorted, and it's just going through the course, and it'll be signed off, no problem at all. So they're still lingering, although they're not, they don't exist anymore really. We had MSP, so 777, MSP, there was the Kaminsky Group, and then obviously the Freakins came to the table in the summer and then went away again. So we thought they were coming in, we were all excited. They went away again, and then John Textor, he appears, obviously Crystal Palace, I think he owns 45% of Crystal Palace. He appears as the front runner, but then he's got to sell his shares in Palace before he can sort of buy the Everton Football Club. Then out of nowhere, the Freakins just agreed a deal, just like that, which we thought might happen. They've done exactly the same with Roma. They wanted to get the best deal for themselves, of course they did, but there was a few background issues which they sorted out. So we're all excited about the prospect, is the best way of probably putting it. As I say, we're not there yet. We've got a fabulous stadium waiting, ready to go. Life for Everton is going to change pretty quickly over the next sort of 9-10 months when we move into that fabulous stadium. A lot of opportunity in terms of commercial revenue, which is really important to the football club, in terms of attracting players as well. With playing in that, what we will say is the best stadium in the Premier League. The only one that will run close will be Tottenham, but that's a NFL stadium. It's a fabulous stadium, but it's built for American football, potentially more than football. I think fans will be surprised, away fans will be surprised about how tight Bramley Moore actually is. It's built for football. It's a replica in terms of how close the stands are to Goodison Park. It's very, very
I actually
tight.
would agree with you there. Not in terms of what Bramley, your new stadium will be like, but in terms of the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Because I was in there on Sunday. Times I've ever been there have been for NFL games, and it's huge.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, I'd probably go along and agree with you there a little bit in terms of. I know it's a dual purpose. And it was designed for the dual purpose, but obviously, you know,
it was. And don't get me wrong, I went there the first time we played them. So we played them the back end of 18, 19, last game of the season. It was 2. I think it finished 2-2, and that was they don't just moved in. I think a couple of months earlier. And it's a fabulous stadium. Listen,
it's beautiful.
It's unbelievable stadium. It's you know, inside with that huge home end, it looks fantastic. Outside, it's a real sight as well. But wait till you get down to Bramley Moor and wait till you get inside, and then wait till you see, as I say, the pitch, the way the pitch is close to Goodison Park, it's close at Bramley Moor, but then you've got this big home end, which is really, really steep. You know, it's going to hold about 52,888. Apparently, there's talk that they found a little bit of extra wiggle room to get to 53,000. It's a nice size. We wanted more, but listen, it's a nice size. The way it's been designed, it's designed to keep the noise in, so it's going to be loud as well. And if you come down in the winter, make sure that you bring a hat, scarf, umbrella, and everything else, because coming out of that ground when the spray off the mares, he's whipping up. Believe me, it's going to be very, very cold as well. But yeah, it's going to be the future looks like it's going to be bright for the football club. But after so many years of uncertainty and negativity, we are looking forward to that.
Sean's question was about the stadium, but you've covered it beautifully there. So I'll just ask you the second part of Sean's question, which was when you do move stadiums, will you take your seat with you when you depart Goodison Park?
I'm not interested in a bit of plastic. Doesn't interest me in any way, shape, or form. No. I've seen people, believe me, I've seen people around me sizing up Spanish sizes and all sorts for the final game of the season of Goodison against Southampton. But not for me. I'm not attached to anything like that. I've only been in this particular seat for a few years anyway, so it doesn't really sort of appeal to me. I think there'd be families there. There'd be people who've sat in the old wooden seats for many, many years in the main stand and the upper and lower Bullens. And, you know, for people like that, I'm sure it's got quite a lot of sentimental value. Maybe, you know, family members who they used to go with who passed away. And I get all that, but not for me. Listen, it's going to be an emotional day against Southampton when we leave that stadium. Of course it is. We need to make sure like we're a Premier League side is the most important thing. But you know, as emotional as it's going to be, it also draws a line under a pretty poor time. You know, most of our fans of my age, you know, I'm nearly 40, but most of our fans of my age have seen us win one trophy pretty much. I was born in the 80s, but I don't remember us winning obviously the FA Cup in 84. I don't remember the league titles in the 85, 87. I don't remember the Cup Winners' Cup in 85. So for me, it was FA Cup in 1995 and nothing else. And that's really sad. And Goodison Park plays its part in that for us in terms of our history. So it will be sad, it will be emotional, but not to the extent I don't think that I'll be shedding tears, because we've got to look to the future. And we've got to look to start a new chapter. And for me, a much more positive chapter than what we've had previously.
Yeah, it's a great question, because one thing it's individual circumstances, isn't it? As you've mentioned, I don't know what I would do if it was me, because I used to go with my dad. He's now passed on. Been with my family, those seats all my life, but I'm not quite sure what I'd do with it if I was to take our seat, if it was us, for example. So I don't know what I'd do. It's very much individual. I've kept you far longer than I anticipated. I'm really sorry for that. Last two questions, and I promise you they're the last two, Mike.
Yeah, no problem.
Score prediction for Saturday. And where can people find your beautiful podcast?
Both sides will score is the first thing that I'll say. I think, you know, we're not quite there. Yeah, we're not quite there yet defensively, that's for sure. As much as we look at that bit better, I still think we're going to concede a goal. I think we can nick it 2-1 is what I've said. But wouldn't surprise me if it's a score draw, is probably what I'd say as well. I think we don't want to be losing the game, but I can see us just scraping through 2-1.
Okay. You won't be surprised to find that not many people come on the Meet the Opposition show that we do here and said their own team's going to get beat. And lastly, where can people find your podcast?
Well, all the podcasts go out across all your major podcast platforms, so your Spotify, your Apple, or everything like that. Twitter, which is our main, or X as it's now called, which I'll never ever get used to. We are at UHT Podcast. Instagram and Threads is at UHT Podcast Everton. And you will find us on YouTube. We do put some episodes on there, not all though. All depends really how we're looking on the day.
And there we go. What an absolutely fascinating conversation. My thanks once again to Mike from the Unholy Trinity Everton podcast. Don't forget, we are partnered with Stonemarket Osteopaths. Don't live life in pain. Tell Freddie the Gov at Talking Town has sent you. 01449613633. But a big game this weekend. We're live again Friday, 8 p.m. with our match preview where we focus on all things ITFC. So join us then. Like, subscribe, all of that. It always helps. And of course, have a great rest of the week. I'll see you Friday. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.